You're listening to The Fire Break with Steve Wolf.
Welcome back to The Fire Break. I'm Steve Wolf. As you know, The Fire Break is sponsored by Team Wildfire, developing innovative solutions for wildfire control, something we all need more of, seems more and more of every day. I've got with us today, live from Supercool, a super cool guy. I've got Josh Dorfman with us, and Josh runs a platform called Supercool, which is all about how to create a less carbon toxified future for us, right? A future in which climate carbon doesn't wreck our lives as much as it does now, and hopefully less than we're planning for it to do so in the future. Josh, welcome to the Fire Break. How are you today?
I'm fantastic, Steve. Thank you for having me here.
You bet. So tell me what you're working on.
So Supercool, kind of as you laid it out, is a platform for what we would call real world climate solutions that are proven, that of course cut carbon emissions, but at the same time are boosting profits, making businesses better, and improving modern life. The thought is, it's not enough today for me to say we're going to go solve climate change and therefore we're going to reduce carbon and we're going to suffer in the process, because there's so much evidence to the contrary and so many solutions out there that actually show either way. If you cut carbon, you can make life better, business can become more profitable, or you can try to make life better, and in the process you're going to actually end up probably in certain ways cutting carbon too. So we try and wrap awesome story around that and help decision makers understand what's out there, what's de-risked, what they could actually go implement in their businesses today.
Okay. And when you say make life better, you're talking strictly in terms of either bottom line or carbon emissions, but not necessarily the overall quality of one's life, right?
Well, let me give you, I'll give you two examples.
Or are you? Is that
right?
your problem?
I'll give you two examples. There's so we feature, kind of a range of, we talk to companies that are growth stage startups. We talked to this company called Zoom recently, ZUM.
Okay.
And it was started by this woman out in San Francisco. She'd worked at eBay. She'd worked at some great places as a tech product manager. She also had kids in school. And she was responsible for picking those kids up, making sure the bus was coming or whatever. And buses, school buses, as she said to me, she's like, Josh, the challenge is the problem is your kids today are having the same experience on the school bus as your grandparents had or their great grandparents had.
Wow.
Right? It just hasn't changed. It's just the yellow school bus.
Right.
The whole world's changed, but there's no technology on that bus. So when it leaves the depot,
some things that stay the same, right, Josh? No.
Some things, right? Some things.
Yeah,
but in this case, it's actually, and I didn't know this, it's a chronic issue across America that in public school districts, kids are showing up late to school because the buses don't run on time. And in some cases, it's really bad. And so
maybe in Germany, that's not the case.
Germany is probably very much on the clock.
Everything runs on time.
Everything runs on the clock. So she developed a whole suite of technologies, and she's now working with over 4,000 schools across the country, many of the major school districts, where they have an AI platform where they say, first of all, we're going to tell you where the school bus is, right? You parent, you administrator, you'll now know it's not just a yellow box. It's a black box, and nobody knows where it is once it leaves. We'll use AI. We'll optimize the bus routes, and once we do that, you're not going to need as many buses. And then with fewer buses, we're going to go electrify them. And so they did this with the city of Oakland. It's the first school district, major school district to go entirely electric. What does that mean? Well, not only do kids get to school on time, less stressed, parents are less stressed. There's less diesel fumes running through those neighborhoods, right? Because everything's gone electric. So you get to a system where the whole system improves. Quality of life goes up for everyone in the process. It's actually a climate, you're electrified, so you've now cut carbon and everybody benefits, right? So life gets better when you actually embrace what is a solution to fix school districts, but it cuts carbon at the same time too.
And I'll just dive into this because I don't know, and maybe you could tell me. But when we say, we cut carbon because we went electric and it made life better for everyone in the process, does that include the people who lived in the country where the lithium was mined and the shipping costs of getting all that material over here? And, and I'm not saying one or the other, I don't know, but in the total sum of it all, is electrification really that much cleaner globally, or is it just cleaner locally?
I like where you're going with this. So the if you were to run and I think it's raising fair points, but I think if you were to run a full life cycle analysis to understand what is the from at least from a carbon impact, you will certainly see that the carbon benefit to going electric is there. If you are near that mine, and I think this does come up a lot, if when people talk about electrification, they talk, well, you're going to need lithium, you're going to need tons of rare earth minerals, right? And this is part of the
Right, all of which came
ongoing
from China, right?
controversy we have, or at least they control
Right.
the global supply chain, right?
Yeah.
But if you look at that relative to the extraction that takes place for fossil fuels, it's not. I mean, sometimes it's a little bit of like, oh, let's go focus on this. This is going to take down electrification, but
Right.
you would actually see something that's probably much more controversial in that regard on the fossil fuel side. So
Yeah. Okay,
nothing's
that makes sense.
perfect, but I do
Right.
think comparatively you're getting to a better place.
Okay. And I do wonder when I see these EV battery fires that really burn until they're done. They could be 10, 12 hours. And when you add all that carbon back in, what's the net gain on that? I would imagine that the emissions from one fire could erase the benefits of hundreds of those cars, which could be okay if there's thousands of those cars. And then you say, okay, well, still the net gain is better.
Yeah, I mean, I'd certainly take your points. I do think on a system wide basis. I mean, it's not just what I think. I mean, it's
Sure.
the what the research will show at a systems level. You are getting to carbon reduction, but I do think all of those things are absolutely problematic, and I think that people can get pretty dogmatic about it one way or the other, right? Where if you are very, very pro EV in a certain future, you don't want to acknowledge there's any problem, right? And
Right.
I've
Sure.
seen that, and I've seen it on the other side as well.
Yeah.
So, so that's one example that we see. But we also see it. We actually did a show recently with we talked to a lot of mayors around the world,
Yeah.
and we talked to the mayor of a smaller city, 1.5 million people in Colombia called Barranquilla. And the reason we got to the mayor of Barranquilla is because he's also very involved in trying to help cities get more financing to do next generation kind of climate investments. And one of the things that came up was he said, look, we went to New York, we went to London, we saw studies that in London, tree-lined streets have higher property values. You see this
Sure.
also in Portland, Oregon. It's actually been studied. And those higher
There's still
property values,
property
therefore,
value anywhere in Portland?
what's that?
There's still property value anywhere in Portland?
Gotta pick your spots. But
Okay.
right. But
Yeah.
so in those areas where there's more tree-lined streets, you get higher property values and therefore more taxes for the city, more revenue. And
Sure.
so in Barranquilla, they came up with a public-private partnership to start planting more trees, getting more trees planted. Well, what does that do? Of course, it's like, yeah, you're pulling carbon, but that's more shade. More shade means you don't have to run your cooling as much. Those streets start to have higher property value, and then you actually start to generate an ROI for the city while you're actually improving the quality of life for residents and bringing down carbon. And so I think if, with thoughtful, intelligent implementation of practices, you can cut carbon and improve quality of life in ways that people end up feeling good about if they are resistant in the beginning because it's
Yeah.
different and it's change. Right?
What are some of the other examples of that?
Well, we had a company on recently actually thinking about the rare earths. This company they're called Cyclic Materials. And Cyclic, it's a Canadian company. They're actually opening their scale commercial facility in Mesa in Arizona. It's the only company in the world that has figured out how to recycle rare earth magnets. And so we mentioned China controls 90% of the supply chain. We have this issue right now with rare earths and
Right.
magnets, right? Where American car companies are thinking, well, geez, we might have to send our motors to China to get the rare earth magnets and ship them back because it's so important. It's not just in clean energy. I mean, the rare earths are in, they're in powerful motors. So they're in MRI machines. They're in hard disk drives and data centers. They are in electric vehicles. They are in wind turbines, but they're in all the stuff that powers modern civilization. So Cyclic Materials came up with a way to take all the stuff that they would call it urban mining, all the stuff at the end of its life that surrounds us now in Western civilization, right?
Right.
And separate out these rare earth magnets from the steel. Most of the steel ends up getting recycled, but the rare earth magnets just are so bound to that steel. It's hard. There's never been a way to pull them apart.
Yeah.
And they figured it out. And so when you pull it apart, then you actually get rare earths. And because they're now like they're the purest rare earth magnets you can get, then better than what you can get from China.
They're pre-refined before they're reclaimed.
Pre-refined, exactly. Yeah, and so then you see, Microsoft, Amazon, all these companies backing and investing into this type of company, and you don't realize really like how important something like a rare earth magnet is, both to the clean energy transition and just to modern life as we know it. And so that's very interesting to me too. These companies that are these infrastructure plays, right, that are like really enabling this future. So important to have this kind of innovation happen, and very exciting to see.
Yeah. So we got rare earths, we got electrification of school buses. These are two things where I could see right away the benefit. Oh, and tree-lined streets. Who doesn't like that, right? So that way you could take an urban area and turn it into a WUI by adding the trees back in.
Exactly. Well, I'll tell you, the way that I started kind of looking for these stories or this kind of evidence of how the world is moving. 4 years ago, so I've been focused on sustainability for most of my career. And I've had 2 furniture companies trying to do modern design and FSC certified, Forest Stewardship Council certified wood, and really just, as sustainable and beautiful as possible. And I was working on this company during the pandemic called Simbly. It was like simple assembly, kind of IKEA style, flat pack, but using really high quality FSC kind of plywood. And I couldn't get it anymore. I just stopped being able to get it. I started thinking a lot more about material. And I was in North Carolina, which was historically furniture country, right? It's like the furniture.
Chapel Hill.
That area. Well, I was up in the mountains in Nashville, but I was introduced to someone who was down in the Durham, Chapel Hill, Raleigh area, who has also had a little mini kind of manufacturing thing going on. And we get on the phone and he says to me, "My gosh, Josh, you're building this sustainable furniture company. It's going to be so great." And I was like, no. First of all, I'm not even sure FSC like certified wood. It's probably better responsibly harvested, but I don't even really know like fully what that means. I think it's good, but we got to do better than that. And he's like, "Well, what would you do?" I'm like, "I don't know. I've heard things about like hemp, maybe it grows fast, like
bamboo."
And he's like, bamboo, right? And so this guy Wada is like, "Oh, I've got 6 giant trash bags of hemp in my garage." And I was like, "What? Like, who are you?" And he's like, "Oh, I just moved to Raleigh, Durham. I spent 8 years at SpaceX. I was running the life support systems to keep the astronauts alive on the Dragon crew spacecraft." I was like, "You just moved to North? You left LA? You moved to North? What?" He's like, "Well, I'm an engineer. I put a spreadsheet together. I had all the cities and I had like the columns of all the criteria I was looking for, and Raleigh came to the top. We came here. There's trees. We like it. Here we are." And so I said, "Well, look, I think we should think about this." And he's like, "Well, we are thinking about it. SpaceXers are thinking about it. We are thinking about carbon removal. Elon's talking about carbon removal. We know that there's not enough land for enough trees to be planted to remove enough carbon to really make that viable at the gigaton scale. So we need something else." And so we said, well, what if we put these ideas together? What if we try and grow something that grows faster than trees, has utility, right? So like if a tree is cut down for lumber, goes down, let's see if we can find something that grows faster and actually use it, build a business around it, and pull a lot of carbon from the atmosphere. And can you get more SpaceXers here so we can go build a factory if we figure out what to do? And he was like, "I think we can." So we did. We built this company called Planted. 4 years later, we found a perennial grass that grows similar to bamboo. It's not bamboo. It's actually thinner, so we can mechanically harvest it, which you can't do with bamboo. We've stood up everything from a tissue culture lab to greenhouse operations to plants that we now provide to farmers to put this perennial grass that's growing year after year, 8 to 10 times faster than trees. And we built an entirely electric, first of its kind production technology that's modular, smaller, and we're building what replaces plywood and oriented strand board, which has replaced plywood largely in home building. Right. It's the structural panels that you nail to the 2x4s. We make that out of grass. And that's a carbon play. So we pull carbon down. We don't give it back up a smokestack because it's electric manufacturing, and we sequester that in houses. And we just secured, well, now probably about 6 months ago, an order for 100 million panels from D.R. Horton, the largest home builder in the country. And so this has
Wow.
some real kind of legs behind it.
Yeah, no, that's a nice contract to have.
Yeah,
A
so
good order, right?
we got to go fulfill it, but it's
Right.
definitely a vote of confidence. And so I was the founding CEO of that business, ran it for 3 years, raised the first couple of rounds of capital, started to establish those relationships. And I rolled off last year. One of the SpaceX guys is now running it as CEO. Incredible to work with SpaceXers. And, that's kind of this business to business innovation that I see more of now that says, what I loved about Planted and what I love about this point of view is, most people think if we're going to solve climate change, you just have to suffer, right? You have to sacrifice, you have to give something up, right? And we're saying we see something else. We go build more houses. We can lock away carbon in houses. We can think different about how we build systems to actually enable a better future fundamentally on all the things that we want. That can be done. It's helpful to work with guys from SpaceX who can figure everything out, but that kind of perspective is possible, and that's the kind of shift that we're trying to bring.
Fascinating. Well, maybe this does go back to something German. If you're trying to capture this carbon, we could finally reintroduce the Berlitz commercial. What are you thinking about? Sinking the carbon.
That's quite a reference, Steve. It's quite a reference.
But it's archaic, but if you've seen it, you appreciate it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. So what's next? You're talking media now, right? Versus, in the durable goods side. And so is the purpose now encourage more people to think that way, or shine a light on more examples of carbon positive activity that didn't come with a suffering consequence? Or where do you see that?
I mean, that's really where we're going. I mean, we're getting more involved globally with what's happening with mayors. We think that that's really interesting. I do see a lot happening with AI, and I find the AI conversation very interesting because on the one hand, you have data centers and you have AI that uses a lot of energy, and so there's that criticism. They say, well, by 2030, criticism through a clean energy lens, right? By 2030, it's projected to be 3 to 4% of all global energy consumption goes toward kind of AI and data centers. That's obviously a lot. That's more than air travel. At the same time, you see solutions, so many solutions that are predicated on AI. I'll just give you another example. We had on this Israeli company. I found this fascinating. Everybody talks about, in my industry, it's about food waste. Food waste is considered to be 8 to 10% of global carbon emissions, somewhere along this chain of agriculture to the store. 30 to 40% of food is estimated is never eaten. It's thrown away because of the inefficiencies in that system. Okay, that's a terrible thing. That's obviously like a moral crisis. It's a food crisis. I mean, given that we have hunger, to think about that, it's appalling. At the same time, it is what it is, right? You get to a situation, how do you deal with it? So this tech entrepreneur, this Israeli guy, came up with a company called Wasteless. And what his core insight was at Wasteless was, when you're a grocery store, what happens when we go to the grocery store? Okay, they have perishables. It has an expiration date. It just kind of keeps its price. And right before the expiration date, they cut the price by 40, 50, 60, 70%. Try to move it. Right. It's not very precise. It's kind of also sort of archaic. It's a system, right? That it's not even a system, and it doesn't work. I mean, some stuff moves, but you end up with a lot of waste. And it's estimated that the cost to supermarkets is 3 to 6% into their bottom line just in food waste.
And their bottom line is already only 2%. It's
already thin, right? So it's like how can you say this is within the numbers, or this is just a cost of doing business? Anyway, so Wasteless came up with an idea. They said, look, we're going to use machine learning. We're going to use some AI. We're going to do dynamic discounting. We're going to start to say, well, what if we, instead of slashing the yogurt by 40%, what if we do 2%? What if we do 2.7%? Let's see if it moves. Let's get the data. Let's dynamically discount, not to discount, but to try where's the right price where we can actually move that product and maximize revenue and minimize waste, right? So it's like a proactive solution that all comes, right? It's plug in, it's easy to integrate, it's not a lot of tech, and so it's easy for a CFO to say yes. And what was interesting was when I was talking with the founder, and I mean, I had my suspicions, but I said, when you go sell into like a Carrefour in France or some company, and Carrefour's now taken it to Argentina, or companies in the US, who do you sell to? Right? Do you sell to the sustainability person? And he said, I can't sell to the sustainability person because the sustainability person only has a budget for posters. I need to go sell, if I can, to the chief commercialization officer or the CFO, ideally, or right below the CFO, because this is about the numbers. He's like, it's the easiest thing for everyone to say yes to around climate because this is about profit, right? This is about just making that company more money, and you're doing all this good for the planet, right? So I find this like where we are going. There's certainly, like, I'm really fascinated by that connection to AI. What AI does, it's all around efficiency, right?
Yeah.
I mean, that's really all around efficiency. So I find that really fascinating. And there's other pieces kind of in this thing that we find really interesting around the clean energy transition, what's happening for homes around batteries and storage and solar, and what's being developed there. We find what's happening around circular economy, like for example, we had this company called Upway on our show. Upway was started by the team from Uber, who opened, I don't know if you remember this, when Uber opened Paris, and like the taxi drivers, and there were all these protests, and there was like not having it, right?
Right.
So the team that was responsible for opening Uber for Paris launched a company called Upway, which is essentially a Carvana for e-bikes.
Okay.
And if you think about, I never even thought about any of this, but if you think about what a Carvana does or a CarMax does, or these places do or I guess eBay Motors, but when you have a robust used market in cars, that enables a bunch of things. It enables people to get lower priced cars, but it also enables new cars to kind of retain a higher price point and keeps all those dynamics in place. Same holds for e-bikes. And so what was interesting and what I didn't know was even in the US, more e-bikes were sold in 2024 than electric vehicles. And with a Carvana-like experience, you can get an e-bike. You could order it from Electric or Sonder or some of these like direct to consumer. All they are is an online store. If you don't like it and you return it, it's actually going to Upway. They're powering all this back end. You don't see it, kind of the guts of the industry infrastructure. Right?
I see.
And then they will resell it at a discounted price, make it more accessible. They take the burden of returns off of these other companies. They bring all this efficiency in, and they can offer warranties and create peace of mind and kind of help this industry mature. And that was otherwise what's going to happen? Well, maybe that e-bike, who knows what's going to happen? Maybe it gets thrown away. Maybe it just, who knows what's going to happen, right?
Someone brings it up to their apartment. It lights on fire. 12 people die.
Yeah.
And New York City Fire Department says, what the hell's going on with these e-bikes?
Exactly. Or, if it were me, years ago, I lived in Los Angeles. I was living in southern Santa Monica, like very close to the ocean. I could see the ocean from my apartment. And I kept thinking, like, man, I got to go do something in that. I got to get on that water. So I went and bought a sea kayak. I was living in this tiny kind of apartment, pulled the sea kayak up into my kitchen, got it into my kitchen. The only way I realized I could get it out of my apartment was I had to push it out the window and like run down and kind of get it before anyone came in the alley and took it, and then I would like haul this thing down to the ocean, and the beach is really long, like really wide down there. I get it down. I'm already exhausted. I'm trying to get this sea kayak. I've never done it before. And it's like January and I'm out on the water and I'm drifting and I'm exhausted. And I see this lifeguard kind of like walking down the beach toward me as I'm trying to get in, and the waves are pulling me, and I get to the beach and I'm like finally lying there on the beach. I've barely gotten out. I've barely done it. And he's like, first time? And I'm like, he's like, yeah. I'm like,
first time. Away?
Yeah. Right. He's like, you're going to have a lot more fun if you stay much closer to the shore. And I was like, yes, good point. So I hauled that thing back to my kitchen, up my kitchen window, and there it stayed for like a year and a half and never moved. So that could be the fate of an e-bike or a sea kayak or anything else. And how do you keep it moving and staying? How do you let someone else have that, another crack at that
Right.
thing? That's the circular economy, right?
I see. Very interesting. What are some other products that are finding new life? What about
Yeah. So
never mind the e-bikes.
yeah.
Okay, if E stands for exercise, then yes, right? Because I think exercise bikes are used mostly for storing the clothing that you're too lazy to hang in your closet.
Well, it's funny you should say that.
Nordic Track, oh my gosh, like 2 weeks of use and 20 years of sitting there.
All right. So when I left business school, I graduated in 2000, right as the dot-com thing was crashing. I went to work for a dot-com in LA. It crashed. And I was trying to figure out what to do. And I thought, oh, I'm in LA. I'm going to take a little moment here. I'm going to write some screenplays. And so I started working on that. That was a little nutty. And of course, the guy who lived next door to me was a fitness guru, because in LA, at the time, at least, you're either like a
Right.
screenwriter or a fitness guru, right? Classic.
Or
He's
both.
like, look, he's like, or both. He's like, what you need to do, Josh, you need to work for me. He's like, he's like, I got a little business going, a little side hustle. I sell like Bowflexes and stuff on eBay. I was like, well, I could use some extra money. And so what I ended up doing was filling my apartment with like the Chuck Norris machines and the Bowflexes, and I had a universal gym in my kitchen, and we were running all these like eBay, resale. And my friends from business school came to visit me who had gone to Citibank or wherever, Booz Allen. And they were like,
Yeah, right.
they're like, they had an intervention with me. They sat me down, like, there's a place for you in the corporate world. Come back from whatever insanity is going on. So it was insane.
And so what happened? Did
So
you move to Bowflex? Did you?
Bowflexes retained a lot of their value. I mean, that was a pretty good thing to be selling. We sold a lot of it, and then I decided that that wasn't going to be my future. And my screenplays weren't very good, so it was time to move on. Kind of both of those things combined. I did not get any options. I did get some good advice. I ended up, I don't know if you ever read this book, A Million Little Pieces, or remember this goes back 20 years, but it was Oprah's #1 best selling. She loved it. And it was about this guy who was writing about his drug addiction.
Okay.
This guy, James Fry. And it's just an incredible book, incredibly well written. Well, I met him while he was writing it, and he had writer's block, and he was dating at the time this girl I'd gone to high school with in New York. Now, we were all in LA, and so all my New York friends had gotten together for a little reunion, and James was there, and he was in the corner, and he's not drinking, he's just kind of by himself, and so I'm like, I'll be the nice guy here, I'll go make Maya's boyfriend feel better. And so I go over, I'm like, hi, I'm Josh. Like, what do you do? He's like, oh, I'm James, I'm a screenwriter. And I kind of roll my eyes. So I'm like, yeah, who isn't? I'm a screenwriter. We're all screenwriters. And
Yeah, right.
So he actually was a bit of a screenwriter. He had a credential, and he's like, well, I'm working on this book. I'm like, well, what is it? He's like, well, it's me. It opens. I'm on a plane. I'm like covered in, blood and vomit, and I don't know where I'm going. And I'm just thinking, this sounds like the worst thing I've ever heard, but I wanted to be nice. I was like, well, if you're stuck, send me what you have. I'll read it. So I'll send you what I have. So he sent me what he had, and I read the first third of it, and I wrote him back. This was in 2000 or 2001. I was like, this is the best thing I've read from any living writer ever. You have to keep going. And so we became friends, and he wrote it. He got Nan Talese at, I don't know, it was Random House or wherever, this incredible publisher and editor behind it, and he sold it for a lot of money, and it was an incredible book. And so he's like, Josh, send me yours and I'll read yours. So he reads my first one, and it was called like The Pirates of Nanjing, because I'd lived in China and I wrote this convoluted thing. And he was like, this makes no sense. And did you ever think you've never published anything? You have no credits. Who's going to go make this in China? Like, no one knows who you are. And I was like, okay, that's a fair point. And he's like, just write a dumb romantic comedy. Don't make it too clever. Just 70%. This was the era of like American Pie. 70%.
Good enough.
That's what America wants, right? 70%.
Right.
I was like, absolutely. I'm going to write the funniest romantic comedy ever. And so I take 3 months, start working on this thing, send it to him. And he's like, okay, come. I've got some notes for you. So I go over to his house. We're sitting on his porch. And he's giving me this kind of sideways look. And he says to me, he's flipping the page. He's like, yeah, Josh, this is funny. He's like, this, like, there's parts of this that are legitimately like laugh out loud funny. He's like, I don't know what kind of career you want here in Los Angeles because this is not a romantic comedy. This is a porn. So
There you
he's like,
go.
so I don't know. Like, what do you?
Oh, so now you're moving up for the big bucks, huh?
Yeah, yeah. So at that moment, I was like, yeah, my time in LA is coming to an end.
All right. Well, LA looks great in the rearview mirror, right?
Rearview mirror, exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
They got the news isn't looking so good in LA right now.
No, that's true. So
From the
yeah,
fire. Wait, yeah, right. I feel like you could use that joke now, Oh, I can't believe I still have my wildfire decorations up. It's riot season.
there you go. Exactly. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So we had massive fire there, huge release. What do you estimate if you've thought about it, the carbon release from 16,000 homes?
Well, I mean,
What does that erase in terms of
benefit.
benefit that other people have? Yeah.
It's a good question, Steve, and I think I don't have an answer for that, but I do recall when the Canadian wildfires were
Yeah.
happening, right? And the
Massive.
impact, I don't remember exactly, but if it was like erased, if it was had contributed some percent of carbon emissions that year globally,
There's
like
about 7
some,
billion
yeah,
tons.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Something just incomprehensible, what that means. And so I think the same thing when you think about what happens in LA, which is just a tragedy on so many levels. Yeah, the impact of when all that stuff burns. Never mind just of course the toxic sludge and the poison and just
Right.
right having to
And when you were
deal with
talking
all
about
that.
OSB, I was thinking about all the binding agents in there and what happens when those go up in flames.
Yeah, no, that's a very good point too. The for us with OSB, what we do is we use a binder where the formaldehyde's been reacted out before it gets to us, which is where a lot of the higher grade OSB has moved to. You still don't want that stuff to burn, right? I mean,
Right.
yeah.
Right. And if you try to figure out how to not have your house burn, by going and looking on the CAL FIRE website for, advice on how not to burn up, you'll see all this, these zones, right? Zone 0, zone 1, zone 2, right? Okay, well, these were houses that were, 10 feet apart? There is no zone 3, zone 4, cut down the trees 100 feet from your house. Like, if you were to cut down everything within 100 feet of your house, you'd have to remove 5 of your neighbors in every direction.
Totally.
So, right. So, when are we going to start giving out advice that actually applies to the way most people live, and
Hmm.
and is relevant in the instances in which the majority of homes are lost?
Yeah.
Because where there's density, because
Yeah.
where you have a house every 10 acres or something, you could lose some houses in a massive fire, but it's not going to be massive to the sense of an urban conflagration.
Hmm. Hmm.
So
I mean, what are your thoughts about that?
yeah, I don't know.
Oh.
Well, um, stop building houses out of fuel, right? What did I would study, like, what didn't burn? Okay, well, the pyramids haven't burned.
Hmm.
The castles in Europe haven't burned, with the exception of some wooden structures inside them. But stone is really good.
Yeah.
Right? It's rammed earth is really good. It's not flammable. Um, of course, if we didn't make houses out of wood, we would lose the benefit that you get of timbers as a carbon sink. And of course, you drop the price and the demand for wood. But I think we have to start looking at things that don't burn.
Yeah. I certainly get that. I mean, of course, we have our view at Planted. We are looking at fire retardation and doing testing to fully understand what that means. We have a view that it performs better than wood, but it's not. There aren't claims that we're publicly making yet. There's an R&D process for
Okay.
us. We've seen. I was just looking at this company called Boxable. Have you seen Boxable?
Yes, I have.
It's interesting
Yeah.
on a number of
Like kind
levels.
of a prefab tiny home concept.
Prefab, modular, yeah, made in a factory where the house can ship flat and then basically
Yeah,
unfolds
that's
almost on
great.
hinges.
House I want.
And I think their materials that they're moving toward are, I know it's like a steel frame. There's aluminum. Um, it's not a wood structure.
So
And
you're saying their costs just went up 50%
yeah, right.
with
In this,
steel and
right. So,
aluminum tariffs,
right,
right?
right. Unless, I mean, you can still source, steel domestically. Um, And the aluminum supply chain, I'm less familiar with, and how dependent we are necessarily on foreign markets. But and I know some of the large builders are looking at Boxable as well, and others. But understanding also, given all the constraints just in home building, are there alternatives, right? And that's been a dynamic that hasn't really shifted in 2 decades. I mean, if you look at prefab, modular kind of factory built homes, my understanding, I mean, I haven't tracked in the last year, but since I was looking at it, it's still only roughly 2-ish% of the market, even though there's so much, I think, wish casting and hope and saying this needs to happen to solve the bottlenecks that we have. Well,
Right.
right. And I certainly, the big builders are looking at it. I don't know when that shift will come, but yeah, these are really tough dynamics. I mean, you're talking about, fire and what's the risk when you're building with urban density, and yet there's more homes that need to be built. We were in a housing crisis in that regard. These are
So you said that we could have, kind of have our cake and eat it too, right? We could have improved carbon outcomes um, without diminished lifestyle experiences. So, and then this is it's somewhat individualistic, but at what degree is the aesthetic of your home or the flammability of your home a compromise? Like I might say that anything less than an R40 log cabin on a lake surrounded by the woods would be a compromise to me, right? I was like, oh, I have to have neighbors within eyesight. Ugh, right? Oh my god, there's some sheetrock in my house. Ugh, right? So, right. So there's going to be some compromise all around. Um,
I mean, doesn't it depend on what just as I'm hearing you talk, it would depend on what your ideal state is, right? What you
right,
want. I think from my perspective, if I were to look at you know, so if I were to look at my home through the lens of, okay, I'm in my home. Here's what I'm using here's the cost of operating my home. Right. This is one aspect, right?
yeah,
How do I get my costs lower? I don't want to pay this much for energy. I don't want to, I want to keep the lights on if extreme weather strikes. There are more and more solutions to do that are more and more viable, even less dependent on incentives that are becoming more cost effective to do that. Right? That's interesting to me. If you're going to
right,
talk about aesthetic, if you're going to talk about safety, right? I think too there's a conversation to be had, but it depends on the issue. Like for example, we had on the CEO, his name's Marshall Gobuddy. He is a real estate developer, and down in Florida, he built a development called Hunters Point, which is right on the Gulf. It actually has boating access to the Gulf, and he's built homes now that are so well built, so well constructed that they have survived the last 3 hurricanes that have hit this region just south of Tampa, right?
wow,
And they have batteries and they have solar, so the lights always stay on, and there's minimal damage. And what that means is that the homeowners in those buildings, they don't have a problem getting insurance, where that actually
right,
now is a problem in Florida for many different
right,
homeowners, right? And so that's tackling a certain kind of problem from a resilience, right? Adapting to more, maybe more severe weather, more storms, but those storms have been coming, for long. They're not going away. You keep the lights on, you have renewable energy, et cetera. You figure that out for that kind of
Yeah.
event, right?
Right.
I don't know. I mean, I don't know. I have to look into, kind of fire more to understand that better. The VC who backed us with Planted, I remember having conversations with him because he's very interested in how are we doing fire mitigation, adaptation, what are the technologies that enable that. I know that's very important to you, and that's, it's something that, we need to spend some more time on thinking about. Years ago, I ran this center called the Collider. This was in Asheville, North Carolina. Asheville is home to NOAA's, it was called the NCEI. It's essentially NOAA's information arm. And so the repository of weather data in America that dates back to captains' ship logs, where they're dipping thermometers in the sea and then putting it in a bucket, right? On saying, okay, well, all that got stored, is stored in Asheville. It's amazing. And so we set up a center to see, could we take all this data and start to build kind of analytic models using historic data to help cities or companies start to forecast, what's happening with extreme weather, what do you have to look out for, and what are the impacts? So that's fire, that's flood, which translates to mudslides and all these other events, right?
Right.
And so I've looked at it in the past from how are we adapting? How are we becoming more resilient to these impacts, these adverse impacts? But yeah, that's a tricky one. Your question about the log cabin, you don't want to see it. I'm gonna be thinking about that. It's a tricky one.
Yeah, it is. Tell me about your journey with the VC capitalization of your ventures.
Well,
So many good ideas die because people don't understand the process of how to get funding for their startup idea.
yeah, and for me, I'd been through it. I had actually, when I was in Nashville, one of the things I did, I helped a number of startups raise capital. I started an angel investor group to try and bring more capital together. And so you would think I would have had a pretty good sense of it. When it was my turn with Planted to go out to raise money, you still make all kinds of mistakes.
Sure.
And we went out and at first we were raising too much money. So that was a mistake, right? Because we're like, let's go raise $10 million. We think that we can do that. We got, I've got my background, we got SpaceXers, and investors were like, no, you guys aren't going to raise $10 million. And we said, okay, well, what do we really, then we do what entrepreneurs need to do. You need to say, okay, what do we really need and what do we think we can get? And let's figure, and what's going to sound right to the investment community so that we're going to pay attention to this. And we figured that out pretty quickly. We were pitching this investor in San Francisco who had left Facebook, and had set up a fund to fund climate tech companies like ours. And a lot of Facebookers at the time were doing this 4 years ago, probably still are, kind of atoning for their sins. I felt like at Facebook, right? Let's go fund some stuff that's going to make us feel good. And she was great. I'm pitching with Wada, my co-founder, and she says to us, all right, time out. She's like, first of all, I'm not going to invest. And so, well, why aren't you going to invest? She's like, well, I don't know you guys. So I'm just probably not going to invest. But she spent 45 minutes. She gave us some great advice. And she said, okay, first of all, your pitch deck, your materials are terrible. She said, you, Josh, and you, Wada, you guys are great, but your materials are awful. So we said, look, well, if you're
honesty, right?
We're like, if you're not going to, will you be an advisor, right? Just advise us, and we'll throw you a little bit of equity. And she said, yeah, I'll do that. So she was really great. So she said, okay, look, here's what the strategy is going to be. Try to make your deck better, but I don't even know. I think you guys are just a mess on that. I don't know why. Don't send your pitch deck to anyone until 10 minutes before the meeting. Don't really give them, let their first impression be you guys, because your passion comes through and you're smart and they'll get it. Your deck is only going to get in the way. And so you should have a really good pitch deck. But I think more than anything else, what you should have is just a really, especially for early stage companies, you have to, of course, know your numbers and know your product and all this stuff. But what you're really selling is vision. I mean, it's just, you're selling your team, you're selling yourself, and you're selling your vision, because you don't have anything in those early stages, right? And that's passion. That's like probably in other ways, like some almost unhealthy belief in your own like superhero power to change the world, because you're going to need it, right? And that's what people kind of gravitate toward. You just have to come in, but yet it's like you have to be that way, but also know when to just kind of shut your mouth and accept what the investor is saying back to you, so that they feel like you have some humility and you can listen as well. I think that's a pretty potent combo.
Yeah. So it's really about being objective about what your strengths are and about what your weaknesses are.
I think that's right.
And then if you
Yeah.
project the idea that you have the whole picture, then they feel like, oh, well, then they don't need me.
Yeah.
Right.
And the
You say,
best,
I've got this one idea, but I have no idea how this other part works. Right.
I think, yeah, I think there's a little bit of humility in there to say, like,
Yeah.
we know we're going to figure this out. We really see it. We don't necessarily have all the answers, and you don't have to have all the answers. One thing I learned, I spent a little bit of time working with at Amazon, or a company Amazon had bought, diapers.com. This goes back, there were these big wars between diapers.com and Amazon. They were fighting over the price of Pampers, trying to outcompete. And of course, Amazon won and bought
How do you like
diapers.com.
that, right?
Yeah. And then I was hired by the guys who had started diapers.com to build this thing, vine.com, like a tomato on a vine. And the thought was, well, you got all these parents shopping on diapers.com, buying their 7th generation diapers and their Burt's Bees and all the natural stuff. But when the kids 3 or 4, they're kind of aged off of a site called diapers.com. Let's go build like an online Whole Foods called Vine, and then we can keep this mom around longer kind of within our fold. So I was brought in to build Vine. And we also had soap.com and wag.com for pets, and yo-yo for toys, and all these like clever names, and all these everything. Yeah. And all these general managers of all these businesses were really like, I think everyone came from Harvard. I didn't come from Harvard, and one came from Dartmouth. I was the outlier. I came from the school called Thunderbird. It was an international business school, but I was the green guy, so I was in the mix. And we'd have this weekly meeting, and it was this guy, Mark Laurie, who had started diapers. Then he started Jet.com, sold it to Walmart. Now he owns, I think, the Timberwolves with like A-Rod, and it's just like a fascinating dude. So he hired all of us, and there's probably 60 of us in this giant conference room. And every week we're going around the room talking about what's good with our businesses. And some are great, some are more difficult to operate. Mine was definitely more difficult to operate. And this guy who ran WAG, I would always, sometimes his business was doing great, for this is the pet one, sometimes not, but whatever, he always made it through this meeting kind of unscathed. And I kept studying him, and I'm like, what is David doing? Like, how does he get through this thing? Because it comes to me, and I'm just like, what is up with your numbers? And I'm like, it took me a while to figure out what Dave was doing. And Dave was doing the same thing that startup founders should do. He would just focus on the one good thing that week. Like, he's like, oh, our margin's up 10 bips, or, oh, and he would just hone in on one thing that was like great. Yeah. And just like, then stop talking, and everyone would be like, oh, wow, WAG's doing great, and you could see the whole thing. And I'd be like, I know he's not doing that well, but like then they'd move, right? It's the same thing when you're pitching investors. Investors ask you some question. They're like, well, I don't know about your margin structure, right? And half the time, all they want to do is sound smart, right? Yeah. But so you just you tell them your one best answer, and then you just shut up, right? You don't have to like babble on, just one thing and scratch the itch. Either they're going to be like, okay, and they probably usually are just like, okay, right? And then like you just move on to the next. Just stop talking.
It sounds like David really didn't do himself any favors though there, because like if you're in a room of 60, smart people who have, business degrees and whatnot, why wouldn't you go in there to share your toughest problem rather than just to get accolades for your success?
Always depends on the culture. And I agree with you. And I do think there were some challenges with that culture in general that was problematic. So I'm by no means you're absolutely right. You're 100% right. My only takeaway was I used that later on in different, with that was my take. What there was more to the point of like, I got to communicate one thing that like pierces something. If I'm in truth, like in that business, if you were going to go really address something, you don't address it in that room. You go meet with the CEO and the team right in a different environment, talk it out.
Yeah.
So you could ask, well, what's the point of having this meeting in the first place? And I think that is a fair thing to ask. It was intense. It wasn't necessarily super productive, but that was my silver lining. Here's what I learned about how I talk to investors.
I say the one good answer and shut up, right?
That's it.
With your current business and Planted and my business and probably, most of the people who are in the space we're in, if you were to sum up, what we want our life to have added up to, right? It usually is something as trite and true as, we want to make a difference, right? And I would imagine that the same thing goes for investors. And you have to give people an opportunity to make a difference. So if you say, look, I've got this solution, I'm 98% here, this 2% I'm really stuck with, you could help make this thing happen, money aside, but with your experience, with your wisdom, you could help us crack this nut. And then people feel useful. And I think people want to feel useful more than necessarily figure out what margin they're going to make on, buying equity in your company.
Yeah, Steve, I think that's a really good point. And I think I think you're wanting investors, right? Hopefully that can add value. But I think that's a good point too. I think when you approach investors through that frame genuinely, right, where it's actually, it's real. Yeah, I think that's a great connection with investors as well. I think that's important.
Yeah, because at some point investing is just for fun. Most people who have the kind of money to invest, they don't need the return. So
right.
What is it they really want? And they really want to feel like they're making a difference.
Right.
So
right.
And if depending on how old they are, if they have kids, then that's even more genuine. They want to do something that's going to help make the world better for their kids or their grandchildren.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and
I think
that's when you really start, taking deep inventory of what you want to invest in and what you want to contribute to.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's interesting.
I agree with you.
Fascinating chatting with you, Josh. It was great. Great to meet
Thank
you
you,
here.
Steve. Likewise. Yeah, great. I appreciate this. It's great to meet you too.
Yeah, excited about what you're doing, and I want to, continue to follow the companies that you're interacting with and see what you do next, because I have a feeling, based on what I've learned from you, there's always a next thing, right? As something, more interesting comes along, or more valuable, more satisfying, or where you can contribute more. I suspect you'll be migrating that way. Chatting with Josh Dorfman here. Thanks so much for being on the show today, Josh.
Thank you. Really appreciate it.
Josh Dorfman with Supercool. Check him out on the web. Supercool, amazing new media platform. Hopefully one day the Firebreak will be as interesting a platform. And I'm working towards that. 3 episodes a week. We're going to get there, I think. Thanks for listening to the Firebreak. I'm Steve Wolf. We're sponsored by Team Wildfire. Till I see you next time, be careful. Find something meaningful. Invest in it. And don't build your home out of fuel. All right, maybe you will. I can't stop you. Take care, and I'll see you next time.